I never even knew that money existed. My grandparents had left me $560,000, a huge amount of money when I turned 25. That money was mine. But my parents, the people I trusted most in the world, had taken it all in 2012. They didn't give me a single cent. I felt my hands shake as I held the papers from the bank. These papers were official, stamped and signed, showing exactly how my parents had moved all my money into their own accounts. They had used it to start Isolde's boutique, a small business my sister dreamed about. That business didn't even last 2 years. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where you watching this from, and what time of day is it. All those years, my parents had told me there was no money to help me with school. They told me I had to figure things out on my own, that I was resourceful and could manage. I had to work 3 jobs, save every penny and get scholarships to pay for college. They made me feel like it was my fault that there wasn't enough money, but really they had taken the money meant for me and given it to my sister instead. I felt a mix of anger, sadness and disbelief. I had worked hard for years, saving money, building a life for myself. My villa, the beautiful home I had bought with my own money, was supposed to be my safe place, my reward. It was the first time in my life I had something that was truly mine. I had saved for 12 long years. I had worked 70-hour weeks, carefully planned every investment and never told my family anything. I had bought a $2 million beachfront villa. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the ocean, a garden for growing roses like my grandmother used to, a home office with a beautiful view and 3 bedrooms. I had even structured the purchase through a special company so my family could never find out it was mine. It was my secret, my reward for all the years of being invisible, for all the hard work no one noticed or appreciated. But now my parents and my sister Isolde, along with her family, were moving in. They didn't ask me, they didn't even think about asking. They just decided it. My home, my sanctuary, the place I had worked so hard to make mine, was about to be filled with people who had never cared about me before. At first I stayed quiet like I always had. I let them move in. I watched as movers carried furniture into my rooms, putting my dining set in the dining room, my chairs in the living room. They didn't ask me where anything should go, they already knew. They acted like it was their house, not mine. My mother came carrying a potted plant and smiled. "We're family, Callista. We know things," she said. My father stood nearby, his expression serious. "Family takes care of each other, right, Callista?" he said slowly. "Unless you want certain things to come out." I didn't understand what he meant, but it sounded like a threat. Something from the past they were holding over me. I felt a chill run down my spine. For a moment I thought about running away, leaving it all behind. But deep down I knew I couldn't. Not this time. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in my bedroom, listening to Isolde's kids running up and down the hallways, hearing her husband on the phone, hearing my parents in the master guest room. My villa, my special place, felt like it was being eaten alive. My safe space, the place where I could finally breathe and feel peace, was no longer mine. At 2 a.m. I gave up trying to sleep. I needed to know what my parents meant by that year. There had to be records somewhere. I needed to find the truth. I drove to my parents' house and let myself in with the key I had kept since childhood. I went straight to the attic where my father stored boxes of old papers. These were the boxes that used to have all of my grandparents' important documents, photos and letters. But now, they are gone. Every box I remembered from my childhood, every album filled with memories had disappeared. Even the old photo albums that showed my family when I was a child were gone. My parents had taken them or thrown them away. It felt like they had erased my life, like I had never mattered. But I didn't give up. I knew banks kept records of everything. I went to the bank that held my grandparents' accounts and requested copies of their trust papers. Took 3 days and a notarized identity check, but I finally got them. I sat in my car and read the papers with trembling hands. The papers showed everything. My grandparents had left $800,000 in a special account. 70% of that money, $560,000, was supposed to go to me, their first grandchild. The remaining 30% was to be shared among any future grandchildren. But I had never received any of it. My parents, who were supposed to manage the money for me, had withdrawn all of it in 2012. They had used my money to fund Isolde's dream, her boutique business. They had taken everything I was meant to have while I was struggling to pay for college, while I worked 3 jobs to survive. I couldn't believe it. I felt like my entire childhood, all the hard work and sacrifice, had been stolen from me. I thought about all the times I had tried to share my life with my family, all the times I had tried to tell them about my promotions, my investments, my successes. Every time the conversation would shift to Isolde. Her expensive wedding, her failed business ideas, her dreams and desires, they all became my responsibility. Callista, you're doing so well financially, my mother would say in that voice that made me feel guilty for refusing. Your sister needs help with a down payment. You can spare $20,000, can't you? Family helps family. And I did help. Over 10 years I had loaned them $45,000. Not once was I repaid. Not once was I thanked. And now I know why. My parents had been taking from me my whole life, using my own money to give my sister everything she wanted, while they made me feel like I had to do everything alone. The realization made my hands shake even more. I had always been the quiet, invisible daughter, the one who worked hard, stayed out of trouble and followed the rules. Isolde, my sister, had been the golden child, the center of attention, always given everything without earning it. And now I have proof. I finally had proof that they had stolen from me, taken advantage of me and tried to erase my life. I thought about my villa, my safe place, the place I had bought with my own money. It was still mine legally. Even if they were in the house now, they couldn't touch it. And I had a plan. For years I had stayed quiet. I had let my family think I was weak and compliant, that I would never stand up for myself. But now I had the chance to change everything. I could show them the truth. I could make them see that the invisible daughter had been watching, had been planning, had been waiting. I started organizing everything carefully. I made copies of all the bank papers, all the trust documents. I wrote down everything my parents had done, every lie they had told me, every time they had used my money for Isolde while pretending there was nothing for me. I made a list of every loan I had given to them and every time they had dismissed or ignored me. I wasn't planning to shout or fight. That wouldn't have worked. My parents were used to me being quiet, to taking their words and moving on. No, this time I would be smart. I would be methodical. I would let the truth speak for itself. The next morning I walked around my villa thinking about the roses my grandmother used to grow. I wanted everything to be perfect, just like she would have liked. I moved the furniture slightly, placed fresh flowers around the house, and made small changes that only I would notice. My plan wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Isolde and her family didn't notice. They thought everything was normal. They laughed, played, and acted like the villa was theirs. But I knew something they didn't. I had proof of everything. I had the truth. And one day soon I would show them. For now I stayed calm. I smiled, helped them find rooms for their things and listened quietly to their chatter. And said I was preparing. Every document, every piece of evidence was ready. Every secret they had tried to hide from me for 20 years was about to be revealed. I remembered the photograph from when I was 8 years old, standing between my grandparents in their garden. My grandmother's arm around me, my grandfather looking at me with pride. I remembered the smell of the roses, the warmth of the sun, the feeling of being loved. That memory gave me strength. They had taken so much from me, but they could never take that. I realized something important. For years I had been invisible, but invisibility is not weakness. Being invisible has allowed me to see everything, to plan everything. They had underestimated me as always. But this time I would not be underestimated. The day I planned to reveal everything finally came. I invited my parents and Isolde into the living room, where I had arranged the documents carefully on the table. I didn't say anything at first. I let them look around, curious. Then I started slowly explaining everything, showing them every proof, every fact, every lie they had told me. Their faces went white. My mother's hands shook. My father's eyes widened. Isolde's mouth opened, but no sound came out. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. They had spent 20 years thinking they could control me, ignore me, use me. But the invisible daughter had been watching, planning, and waiting. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in decades. Finally, justice. Finally, the truth. Finally, the moment they realized that I was not weak, not invisible, not to be ignored. For the first time in my life I felt truly seen. And from that moment on, things would never be the same. When I started looking at my credit reports and financial papers, I found something shocking. Something I never expected. There was a business loan from 2015 for $200,000. In the documents, it said Callista Dane was listed as a co-borrower. I had never signed anything like that. I had never even been asked to sign such a loan. But somehow, There was a signature on a scanned copy of the application that looked a lot like mine. It was almost my handwriting. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know how it got there. That very afternoon I called a forensic document examiner. That is a person who can look at handwriting and tell if a signature is real or fake. I wanted to know the truth right away. Then I hired a financial fraud lawyer. A financial fraud lawyer is someone who deals with people who trick others out of money. That's when she found even more problems. She showed me new loan applications that had been filed within the last month. These loans were very suspicious. They listed Isolde and Mark as the main borrowers. But they used my villa's address as collateral. That means they said my house would pay for the loan if they couldn't. They also used my name and my signature on guarantor forms. I had never seen these forms before. The signature expert confirmed what I had already feared. They were all forgeries. Someone had faked my signature. Someone had lied and pretended it was me. But proving forgery in court is not easy. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. I already knew this would be a long fight. My family's lawyer had also sent a warning through Isolde. Be careful about making accusations that could embarrass the whole family. I felt trapped, but the worst discovery was yet to come. My private investigator, someone I hired to follow the facts, found a $300,000 loan application that had been submitted just a few days ago. It listed me as the guarantor again. The signature looked exactly like mine. If this loan went through, I would be legally responsible for the debt even though I never agreed to it. That meant I could lose my house or have to pay a huge amount of money. And all of this was happening because of my own family. The investigator's report also showed that Isolde owed $450,000 to various creditors. She was close to losing her own home. My family needed my villa, my credit, and my financial stability to save themselves from the troubles they had caused. I was sitting in my home office, gathering all this evidence. I was tired and worried. Then late one evening I heard voices coming from the kit iron below. The voices were so familiar. One of them sounded like my father. He was talking casually, confidently, as if everything was normal. She won't do anything. He never does. She'll complain, but she won't actually fight us. She's too afraid of what we'll reveal. Then Isolde laughed. That same laugh she had used when she called me stingy. I sat frozen at my desk. My hands gripped the edge of the desk so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My family wasn't just stealing from me, they had planned everything carefully. They faked documents, planted evidence, and built a legal trap around me. They thought I would be too scared to fight back. But as I sat there listening to them celebrate their cleverness, something inside me changed. My fear dissolved. It was replaced by something colder, something sharper. I was angry, but in a very focused way. They thought I was still the quiet daughter who would swallow any injustice to keep the peace. They thought I would let them steal my inheritance, forge my signature, and take my home without consequences. I smiled in the darkness of my office. They were about to learn how wrong they were. But I had less than 2 weeks to dismantle everything they had built. The countdown had begun. On day 9 my lawyer called me. Miss Dane, this is Kaylin Draven representing your sister's family. I understand you've been requesting documents from banks and hiring forensic experts. I strongly advise you to stop. If you continue, you'll find that evidence shows you were involved in family financial decisions all along. Documentation exists proving your consent and participation. He paused and then continued. Additionally, your family is prepared to publicly discuss how you abandoned them for years, refused help during difficult times, and are now attempting to evict your sister's family, including 2 young children, from housing you offered. Think carefully about the consequences, Miss Dane. Family disputes can get very ugly and very public. He hung up before I could respond. An hour later my father called. His tone was soft, calm, the good cop to the lawyer's bad cop. Callista, sweetheart, we know you're upset, but you're making this bigger than it needs to be. Let's sit down as a family and work this out quietly. No lawyers, no drama. That's not who we are. As if we had ever been anything but broken. But his call gave me an idea. They wanted quiet, they wanted private. They were counting on my shame, on my fear, on my desire to avoid a scene. So I decided to do the exact opposite. I am on the board of a charity called the Coastal Preservation Alliance, which protects beachfront ecosystems. As a board member, I had every right to host a community event. I sent invitations to my neighbors, local business owners, the charity board, and most importantly, a financial crimes investigator named Selah Iron. I had met her at a professional conference last year. I told my family it was a simple meet and greet, a chance to introduce myself to the community and talk about property values. Isolde loved the idea immediately. We can help you host. It'll look so good showing everyone we're a close family. Perfect. I spent the week preparing. Every conversation in my house was recorded, because California law allowed me to record if I gave my own permission. Every forged document was analyzed. Every piece of evidence was organized into a presentation I memorized completely. The night of the gathering, 30 people filled my living room. My neighbors wore business casual clothes, charity board members held wine glasses, and local business owners were networking politely. My family played their roles perfectly. Isolde was charming, my parents looked proud, and Mark acted like a devoted brother-in-law. I waited until everyone had a drink and the room settled into comfortable conversation. Then I stood at the front next to a screen. Thank you all for coming. I want to share a story about family trust and what happens when boundaries are violated. I began. The room quieted. Isolde smiled, thinking this was about community values. I projected the first document. This is the deed to my villa. It belongs solely to my LLC. I am the only owner. Next, I clicked to show forensic analyses of signatures on loan documents that bore my name. The expert confirmed they were forgeries. Then I projected my grandparents' trust, showing that I should have inherited $560,000 20 years ago. I had received nothing. Isolde's smile froze. My father stood up. Callista, what are you? My attorney quietly spoke. This is a private property event, Mr. Dane. Callista has the floor. My mother tried to cover it up. It's a misunderstanding. Callista agreed to help us years ago, she's confused. I pressed play on the audio recording. My father's voice filled the room. She won't do anything. He never does. She'll complain but won't fight. She's too afraid of what we'll reveal. Then Isolde's laugh. Even if she tries, we have enough paperwork to prove she agreed to everything. My lawyer made sure of that. The room was dead silent. Then the door opened. An elderly woman stepped in. Her white hair was pulled back. Her eyes were sharp and kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic from Sacramento was terrible, she said. My father's face went white. Mirabelle, you're supposed to be dead. She smiled sadly. I know you hoped I was, but I made a promise to my best friend and I keep my promises. Mirabelle Iron walked to the front and handed me a folder. Inside was a handwritten letter in my grandmother's handwriting. It said that if I didn't receive my inheritance, or if my parents claimed it had been used for the family, they were lying. The inheritance was specifically for me, for my education and future. I read it aloud, my voice shaking. The folder contained everything. The original will, letters expressing concern about my father's financial irresponsibility, and a notarized statement from my grandmother's attorney confirming my parents had withdrawn my inheritance against the will's terms. My mother was crying. Isolde grabbed her children and was moving toward the door. Then Selah Iron, the investigator, stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Dane, I'm going to need you to stay. We need to discuss these forged loan applications currently pending with federal banking institutions. That is a federal offense. I watched my father's face crumble. My mother's tears. Isolde's panic. I felt no triumph, just deep, exhausted relief. Real justice moves slowly and thoroughly. Within days, federal investigators launched a comprehensive audit of my family's finances spanning 15 years. The $300,000 loan application was immediately rejected and flagged for fraud. Isolde's creditors discovered they had been misled about collateral, and foreclosure proceedings on her house accelerated. My parents weren't arrested. Instead, they were interviewed, documented, and informed that civil action would be supported by evidence of systematic financial fraud. They were banned from applying for loans or credit for 7 years and required to attend financial fraud counseling. Isolde lost her marketing director position because her employer could not keep someone whose judgment and ethics were publicly questionable. When I heard this, I felt a pang of something, not exactly sympathy but recognition of how completely their world was falling apart. The 30 witnesses at my gathering included people connected to my family's social circles. The story spread, but not as gossip, as documented fact, as a cautionary tale. Relatives started calling an elderly aunt I barely knew. I learned she had once asked my mother about my inheritance and had been told to mind her own business. A cousin revealed my parents had asked him to co-sign a loan years ago. When he refused, they had told everyone he was abandoning the family. Their manipulation was not unique to me, it was their pattern. I filed a civil lawsuit for my inheritance plus 20 years of compound interest, $1.2 million. I obtained a legal restraining order, preventing them from accessing my property or using my name financially. I changed every lock, closed every connection that remained open, and sent formal notifications to all relevant institutions. When Isolde lost her house, I did not intervene. My attorney asked if I was sure. "I'm not trying to destroy them," I said. "I was just no longer saving them from the consequences of their own actions." I offered one settlement option: structured repayment through asset sales, and I would not pursue criminal charges. They had 30 days. I also wrote a statement to my extended family. "I do not hate them, but I cannot have a relationship with people who see me as a resource, not a person. This door may open again if genuine change occurs. Until then, I choose peace." 3 weeks later, my mother called. Her voice trembled. "Callista, your father is in the hospital. Blood pressure. He's asking for you. He wants to apologize." I drove there with a heavy heart, wondering if I had been too harsh. My father was propped in bed, tired but stable. He took my hand. "Callista, I'm sorry. We made mistakes. But we are still family. Your niece and nephew miss their aunt." The familiar pull tugged at my chest. Guilt, obligation, the trained response to forgive. Then he added something that made me see the truth. "If you drop the lawsuit, we can move forward. We'll pay you back slowly and we can be family again." The fog cleared. This wasn't an apology. It was a negotiation. They weren't sorry for hurting me, they were sorry they were caught. I removed my hand gently. "I'm glad you're okay, Dad. But the lawsuit stands. You stole from me for 20 years. Getting caught doesn't erase that." My mother, silent until now, exploded. "After everything we've done for you, raised you, fed you, gave you a home, this is how you repay us?" I turned back, completely calm. "You did the legal minimum required of parents. That doesn't give you the right to steal my inheritance and forge my signature. Goodbye." I walked out of that room feeling lighter than I had in 36 years. For the first time in decades, I had no guilt, no doubt. I just had clarity. My mind felt clear, like the clouds in the sky had parted. I could breathe again. It was a strange feeling because for so long I had carried the weight of my family on my shoulders and suddenly it was gone. 2 months later, while I was sitting at home, a letter came in the mail. It was from a law office I had never heard of. My stomach dropped. My hands shook as I held it. Were they suing me now? Had I done something wrong without knowing? I took a deep breath and opened the envelope, my heart pounding. Inside was another letter from a second lawyer. I learned that my grandmother had secretly hired this lawyer long ago. The letter explained that my grandmother's trust had another provision, something that had never been used before. My eyes widened as I read on. There was $200,000 set aside just for me. But there was a condition. It could only be released if I stood up for myself. At the bottom of the letter, in my grandmother's handwriting, was a note. "If you are reading this, it means you found your strength. I always knew you would. This money isn't for them. It's for you to build the life you deserve." I sat on my deck, overlooking the ocean. The waves rolled in and out in their eternal rhythm and tears streamed down my face. But for the first time in decades, these weren't tears of pain. They were tears of being seen. Finally, completely seen. I felt like my grandmother had been speaking to me from beyond, telling me that I was strong enough to finally take care of myself. I read the letter over and over for 3 days, savoring every word. It was like she had known exactly what would happen 2 decades earlier. Every sentence was full of care and wisdom. On the 4th day, my lawyer called me. "Callista," she said gently, "that money is legally yours. It's completely separate from the settlement. You should claim it." I stared out at the ocean. The waves reflected the golden light of the afternoon sun, sparkling and calm. I was already receiving $1.2 million from the settlement. I had my career, my villa, my peace. What would another $200,000 really give me that I didn't already have? I thought for a long time and finally spoke. "I want to use it to start a foundation," I said. "Legal help for people dealing with family financial exploitation. I want to call it the Gray Stain Foundation after my grandmother." There was a long pause on the line. My lawyer finally said, "You're giving it away?" "Yes," I said. This money was for my healing and freedom. Helping other people is what heals me. I'm already free. I don't need more money to prove anything. 2 months later, the foundation launched. We started small, but we started. It felt good to do something that could help other people who were going through what I had been through. Meanwhile, I began reclaiming my villa. I didn't just remove my family's belongings. I transformed the space into something that was truly mine. One day, while sorting through old boxes in the storage room, I found a photograph. It was a picture of me as a child standing with my grandparents in their garden. The photograph had faded, but their smiles were still visible. I had it professionally restored and hung it in my living room where I could see it every day. My grandmother's smile, my grandfather's proud expression, and the little girl I used to be, before I learned to disappear, reminded me who I really was. I painted the guest room a deep teal color, a bold shade my mother always said was too bright. I adopted a rescue dog, a gentle golden retriever mix named Oren. Despite the voice in my head telling me that single people shouldn't have pets, I knew I deserved love and companionship. Oren quickly became my constant companion, sitting by my side as I worked or rested, reminding me that I was not alone. I created a home office with a view of the ocean. Without the weight of family obligations pressing on me, my mind felt clear and sharp. I was more creative than I had been in years. I started hosting small gatherings, not the kind where people took advantage of me, but gatherings with colleagues and friends who genuinely cared about me. Neighbors who had witnessed my courage reached out with sincere support. Even a few distant relatives sent thoughtful messages, saying they understood why I had taken a stand. For the first time in my adult life, I had people in my space who didn't want anything from me except my company. The difference was staggering. 4 months after the foundation launched, I received an invitation to speak at a community center. They wanted me to talk about financial literacy and family boundaries. My first instinct was to decline. I felt nervous, unsure if I could handle telling my story to a room full of strangers. But then I thought about my grandmother's letter, her belief that I would find my strength, and I said yes. When I arrived at the community center, the room was full. Mostly women over 50. I saw expressions I recognized. Faces of people who had spent years accommodating others, sacrificing their own happiness, putting everyone else first. I began speaking. My voice was steadier than I expected. I used to believe that being a good daughter meant sacrificing everything, I said. I thought that setting boundaries made me selfish or cold. But I learned something important. You can love your family without letting them destroy you. Boundaries aren't betrayal. They are self-respect. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to your money, your home, or your peace just because you share DNA. I told the women everything. The stolen inheritance, the forged signatures, the systematic manipulation I had endured. But I also shared Mirabelle Iron walking through my door with my grandmother's letter, the decision to create a foundation instead of keeping the money, and learning that healing doesn't require the people who hurt you to apologize or change. The hardest thing I did wasn't confront my family. It was forgiving myself. Forgiving myself for all the years I stayed silent, for all the times I accepted less than I deserved. But I told the audience, you can start creating boundaries today. It's never too late to choose yourself. The standing ovation startled me. Afterward, dozens of women approached me with their own stories. Mothers who had stolen their children's college money, siblings who forged names on mortgages, parents who used guilt to control. Each story was different, but the pattern was always the same. Exploitation dressed as family loyalty. My grandmother had been right. My purpose wasn't just surviving. It was showing others that they could survive too. 6 months after that first gathering, I sat on my porch watching another sunset. The sky was painted in shades of gold and pink. I hadn't heard from my parents since the hospital. My attorney told me they had made their first settlement payment. Isolde, my sister, sent one text 3 months ago. I hope you're happy now. I didn't reply. I felt no anger toward them, but I also didn't want to reconnect. Maybe someday if they demonstrated genuine change. Or maybe not. Either way, I knew I would be okay. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the foundation. We had helped our first client, a 42-year-old woman whose parents forged her name on a home equity loan. She wrote, "Thanks to your story, I knew I wasn't crazy or ungrateful. I knew I had the right to protect myself. You showed me it's possible to love my family from a safe distance." I saved the email and opened my laptop. I had been writing a memoir, tentatively titled The Invisible Daughter. I was finally ready to tackle the hardest chapter, the one about forgiveness. Not the kind where I absolve my family for what they did, but the kind where I forgive myself for choosing peace. I typed the first line. My name is Callista Dane, and this is the story of how I learned that being a good daughter doesn't mean being a doormat. I didn't know if I would publish it, share it with the foundation, or keep it for myself. But the act of writing it, of owning my story completely, was freedom in itself. Oren rested his head on my lap and I scratched behind his ears. The villa stood behind me, solid and beautiful. A proof that I had always been strong enough to build something worth keeping. For the first time in 36 years, no one could take that away. Callista's story didn't end with revenge. It ended with something far more powerful: freedom. Real, authentic freedom that comes from finally choosing yourself after a lifetime of being chosen last. If Callista's story resonated with you, if you felt that familiar ache in your chest when you heard about the invisible daughter, the stolen inheritance, the family that kept talking until there was nothing left, know that you are not alone. Many people have lived versions of this story. Maybe it wasn't a $2 million villa or a stolen inheritance. Maybe it was smaller, quieter betrayals. The sibling who always got more attention, the parent who never acknowledged your achievements, the family members who only called when they needed money, or the guilt that weighed on you every time you tried to say no. The voice in your head that says good daughters, good sisters, good children don't protect themselves is lying. You are worthy of protection. You are worthy of love without conditions. You are strong enough to stand up for yourself. Callista's grandmother left her more than money. She left a message that we all need to hear. You are always worthy of being protected. You are always worthy of being loved without conditions. You are always strong enough to stand up for yourself. If you're watching this and thinking about your own family, about your struggles with boundaries, guilt, and obligation, hear this clearly. Setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person. Protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish. Walking away from people who exploit you, even if they're family, doesn't make you cruel. It makes you wise. Now I want to ask you something. If Callista's journey moved you, if it made you feel seen, please share your story in the comments. Have you ever been the invisible child in your family? Have you ever had to set boundaries with people who called you selfish for protecting yourself? Or are you still in the middle of your own Callista moment, trying to figure out if you're strong enough to stand up for yourself? For those who have already made it to the other side, who have set boundaries and reclaimed their peace, share your wisdom. Someone reading your comment might be exactly where Callista was, scared, confused, and on the verge of finding their strength. And I also want to know this. What would you have done in Callista's situation? Would you have confronted your family privately? Or would you have done what Callista did and exposed everything publicly with witnesses? Do you think she should have given her family a second chance? Or was she right to maintain her boundaries even when her father was in the hospital? There's no wrong answer here. Every family situation is unique, and what worked for Callista might not work for everyone. If you found value in Callista's story, hit the like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe a friend who always puts everyone else first, maybe someone struggling with family boundaries right now. Sometimes, seeing someone else's story helps us understand our own. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Next week, I'll share the story of a woman who discovered her mother-in-law had been slowly sabotaging her marriage for 15 years, and the way she handled it was brilliant. Remember, you don't owe anyone access to your peace. You don't owe anyone unlimited forgiveness. You especially don't owe anyone the right to exploit you just because you share DNA. Callista learned that lesson.